Yes, so Lombusho, please just go ahead and present.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Hello?
Hello, yes, yes, we can hear you. Yes,
all
please.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. Let me just share my screen. Good day, colleagues. Good day, Chair. I'm Precious Shabalala, NCAP lecturer at University of Mpumalanga, a lecturer in heritage and tourism. Today, I'll be presenting, just a minute, sorry, let me just. Today, I'll be presenting under the topic, significance of African World Heritage Sites as a tourism attraction, the case study of South Africa. This is the outline of the presentation, but here now, this is the introduction of my presentation. Here we are looking at the narrative that was presented by Mkono, where the author was indicating that tourism in Africa is an ever-evolving tale of communities and economies, where they're striving to deliver memorable tourist experiences while optimizing in the face of many challenges. Obviously, we are aware that the challenges are there, are existing. Even now, we are just coming from COVID, which now the theme of the conference becomes relevant to say now we are falling back in love with tourism. Regardless of the challenges, we need to strive and ignite the tourism industry. Here we are looking more in the context of World Heritage Sites, looking the status of World Heritage Sites where it enhances the value of a tourist site, and also is looked as a marker of an authentic of the site in terms of its cultural heritage or natural heritage. We know that even though you have the status, but this status can also be used as an advantage by tourism managers through destination marketers as a competitive tool when marketing their sites to the world. And also when we are saying marketing to the world, we must not forget marketing to our own continent as an African continent, learning from what happened now during COVID. We know that especially here in South Africa, we try to implement the intra and intra-tourism to try and get our local people to tour their own provinces, to tour their own local attractions. So now when we use this World Heritage Status, must not only look at the international, also look at home, the domestic, the locals. And also we use it as a positive way to ensure proper heritage management and conservation activities. Because I like to believe that once we have that status, there are regulations and policies and rules that you need to abide to. Obviously, something that needs to happen before then, but once you have the status, you just want to ensure that you keep the status and adhere to all the rules that are in line with the managing the heritage sites and the conservation of the assets that are within that site. Here in South Africa, it's a home of 10 declared World Heritage Sites, which are primarily expected to protect the heritage inherited from the past generation while enjoyed by the present and also preserve for the future generation, which I will just I'll show you now a table in table 1 in the next slide, where I've listed those 10 declared World Heritage Sites that are found here in South Africa. We also note that the World Heritage Sites are also expected to lead on economic development associated with tourism products and services, while contributing to improving the standards of living of the local people. So since we are aware that these heritage sites are, most of them are found in rural areas, therefore it's in line to now to have that expectations when it comes to World Heritage Sites to also contribute when it comes to economic development, but not just contribute for anybody, but most importantly, for the people who are living around that area and improve the standard of living, which now we'll talk to the socio-economic impact of the World Heritage Sites around the areas where are being found. In addition, the tourism sector is perceived to be the most powerful economic and social, cultural, and ecological and political forces in the world today. Therefore, it also portrays crucial to community commercial strength. Therefore, it tells you that World Heritage Sites become relevant in many aspects because we know now, as I just presented, they have the economical power, they have the social power, the cultural, ecological, even the political forces that World Heritage Site can be able to bring in the area. As I've just indicated about the World Heritage Sites, that's in South Africa, we have 10, which is the youngest, is in my province, in Mpumalanga province, the Makonjwa. But I would like to draw your attention to the Babacon Makonjwa, the number 1. If you check here, Babacon Makonjwa is not only in South Africa. If you can check on the province, I just put the province because I was listing the ones that are in South Africa. But some World Heritage Sites, they are not only here in South Africa. You find the heritage site that it's in South Africa, but the other part is in another country, which now present an opportunity for these 2 countries or more than 2 countries to work together. Here we look at Makonjwa, we find it in Mpumalanga. The remainder is in the borders of Eswatini, which is our neighboring country there. Then I also like to draw your attention to Mapungubwe. Mapungubwe landscape, which was designated in 23, is a cultural site. If you check down there, it's number 7, the one I'm talking about. It's here in South Africa, but it borders 2 countries, which means that South Africa is the 3rd one, Zimbabwe and Botswana, which also present another opportunity for these 3 countries to work together. Then I also have the last one, the one that is borders Lesotho and South Africa. The number 6 one, the Maloti Drakensberg Park, which was designated in 2017, which is natural and cultural of its nature. So you can see this one, it also presents a good opportunity for South Africa and Lesotho to work together when it comes to this World Heritage Site to become more relevant and also be economically and socio-economically impact to the local people, even to both countries. Also, when we just look the study that has been presented by Cross and Mecca in 2002, where they highlighted the fact that cultural heritage tourism has the potential to enhance the quality of life in the local people, which it also concur with the previous author that I've just narrated. Therefore, it has been identified as a powerful economic development tool that can be used to generate jobs and help revitalize rural communities. So now, as we look the World Heritage Sites in line with the cultural heritage tourism, because we know some of them, they are being significant for their cultural significance. Then when we bring the heritage, the cultural heritage component, we can see now that these heritage sites becomes more significant when it comes to the economic development and social economic significant to the local people. In addition, it is believed that the cultural heritage tourism provide an economical rationale to conserve both build heritage, social fabric of antique neighborhood, and through adaptive reuse. Then also the study by Langford did also that investigated the relationship between heritage tourism and sustainable development with special reference to World Heritage Site. This study established that although World Heritage Site is not necessarily linked to tourism growth, but it could develop sustainable models and propose a management plan that can be mitigate the negative impacts of tourism and enhance the sustainability of cultural heritage assets. Because as I've indicated in the beginning to say, we have challenges, we have problems, but we cannot shy away from igniting tourism. Therefore, now we use this cultural heritage to develop models and propose models that can suit on this mitigating the challenges that we are facing, because the aim is to ensure that sustainable cultural heritage tourism takes place. As is supported by Jimura, where indicates that most heritage sites suffers from lack of funding, resources, and expertise, though the aim of World Heritage Convention is to encourage international cooperation, exchange of knowledge, expertise, and funds. This is where Africa and the neighboring countries, especially those, some of the World Heritage sites that I've just indicated on table 1 that belong to more than one country, to say we've come together, we share expertise, we share knowledge, and also even now to equip one another to say, how can you raise funds to ensure that these heritage sites don't suffer, hey? Because we believe here in Africa, we have the knowledge, we have the expertise that we can share and take our heritage sites forward. The aim of this paper that I'm just presenting to you today, it says, since the African content is rich in natural and cultural resources, as I've just presented, the paper aims at advocating for the significance of African World Heritage Sites as a tourism attraction, because with the significance that it has, it tells you that that significance, it resides only on that World Heritage Site. Therefore, we have that, we can use that as a pull factor for the people to come to tour that particular World Heritage Site. Then it makes it significant to say, now this World Heritage Site, it can be seen as a tourism attraction, but now we can work around that idea as an African context. That's when I present it as an African World Heritage Site. The methodology that was adopted for this study, it was a qualitative method where some of the descendants of Mapungupo World Heritage Sites were interviewed. On this study, I only took the data from the traditional leaders. That's where I interviewed the traditional leaders to get their perspective around the subject matter, where a content analysis was used to analyze the data.
Dr. Shabalala, you might have to see how to wind up, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just attach the key finding. Thank you very much. The key finding is that a well-managed and well-marketed heritage site have the potential to be popular, also to be appealing to destination marketers as a result, and being regarded as a tourism attraction of choice. This finding also indicates that in return of the site will be positioned to meaningful benefits for the local community and provide authentic heritage products and services to the tourists. Then I can just touch on the conclusion to say this paper concludes by indicating the necessity to consider a bottom-up approach as it's a useful tool. And also it supports the Marxists who believes that the benefit of the such project should be available to majority rather than the few. Therefore, such activities will make World Heritage Sites appealing to local communities, and they will also view their sites as their own and be dedicated to uplift and protect these sites. Therefore, it is vital for the World Heritage Site managers and state parties, experts in African continent to engage and capacitate with one another in involving their expertise, communities, and developing management plans that will recognize the role of all stakeholders. These are the references of the work that I've done, and also I acknowledge the acknowledgements of the people that really assisted me, and ngiyabonga. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shabalala, for that wonderful presentation. So we now get to our next presenter, Lemmy Mwashigadi. Please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Just give me a moment. I will share my screen. All right, so my name is Lemmy Molwala from the University of Girona, and I will be discussing conservation in non-state protected areas. And I will be doing this through a post-human lens. And I'm really happy to be part of this session today, and I look forward to your questions and input at the end of the presentation. So just to give you a bit of background, is that the world is currently grappling, as you all know, with the issue of declining biodiversity. We have widespread consensus now that current approaches will not be enough to address these declines, and that there's an urgent need to increase the global protected area network with plans to achieve 30% coverage by 2030, which is now only 8 years away. And then you add to this fact that a large percentage of global biodiversity is found on private lands, then the importance of private lands to biodiversity conservation becomes apparent. And despite this growing importance, there is a research gap when it comes to non-state government protected areas, especially when you consider this against the number of the amount of research that is based on conservation in general. And as these private protected areas continue to grow, so do the challenges they face. And as the global socio-political landscape is shifting, now is the time to look into newer interdisciplinary approaches, such as interdisciplinary approaches to conservation, because current developmental approaches such as community-based tourism have largely failed to deliver expected outcomes, which is the starting point for this research. That said, my research has two main objectives. Number one was to identify the main challenges that face non-state protected areas, and this research was conducted in Laikipia County in Kenya. I will touch on Laikipia a bit later in the presentation. And then the second objective was to look into posthumanism and how posthuman ideas can be applied to address the challenges that face non-state protected areas. So just to look briefly at the literature, some of the issues that came up was the, in brackets, colonial history of conservation in Africa. And here we are looking at the issue that modern conservation approaches are built on a historical foundation of colonialism and oppression of both people and the environment. And I think this applies to almost the whole of Africa. And this kind of ties into what Professor Harris said at the beginning in her presentation, that it built this romanticized image of Africa as a wilderness. And here it's important to discuss fortress conservation model that was exported to Africa as part of the European colonial project, turning what were once indigenous lands into protected areas where communities were no longer allowed to practice their livelihood activities. Then another important issue is neoliberalism and the commodification of nature, what has variously been referred to as selling nature to save it. And here we're referring to how nature or conservation and socio-political facets of life are brought under the dynamics of capitalist markets. Then another point is indigenous stewardship and knowledge systems. And this is the knowledge, innovation, and practices of indigenous and local communities across the world, and how these local communities use this knowledge to relate to and conserve nature. So here, when I talk about non-state protected areas, I am basically talking about protected areas that are not under government, are not run by the state or local or national governments. And then you might be asking yourself, what is posthumanism? So just in a very briefly, I'll say that there are a few definitions of posthumanism out there, but at its core, it seeks to blur the boundaries between humans and non-humans, and it deconstructs the idea of human supremacy. So deconstructing human means it opens us up to new perspectives. So linking posthumanism and conservation, the idea is to move away from what are paternalistic views of towards nature, and instead we put attachment, care, and justice at the forefront and move beyond dominant neoliberal conservation narratives to develop more sustainable relationships with nature. To simplify this, at its core, we are talking about moving away from protecting nature because it's a resource to be exploited in the future, but rather we develop an ethic of care and protect nature for its inherent value. So the kind of posthumanism that I advocate for in this research calls for a transformation of the human and how we relate to our environment, which is humans and non-humans. And to tackle what are called the wicked problems of our times, we need to accept and appreciate our differences, leverage on the diversity of heritage and indigenous knowledge, and relate with other humans and nature in ethically responsible ways. So I conducted my study in Laikipia County, which is one of the 47 administrative regions in Kenya. Laikipia has set itself apart as an important part of the conservation landscape in Kenya, with the most wildlife outside of gazetted protected areas in Kenya. Additionally, approximately 50% of Laikipia's almost 9,500 square kilometers land area is made up of what are largely private conservation areas, which you can see on the map here. And curiously, there's not a single national park or game reserve in Laikipia. So none of these are government owned, except the two green areas you see, the two forests. And therefore, almost all the wildlife in Laikipia is on private land. And then if you couple this with the fact that there have been various land use conflicts in Laikipia over the years, it makes it a very interesting case study an interesting case study. And here you can see a map of Laikipia and the various conservancies in the area. So this research is based on a qualitative inquiry, and it's based And this basically means that researcher and participants' views and opinions are what are considered in this paper. And because this is largely an exploratory study, rather than use predetermined theory to do the analysis, I elected to use constructivist grounded theory as defined by Sharmas. And this was basically to see what new insights can come up from the research. Constructivist grounded theory here refers to the fact that there is a co-construction of knowledge between the research and the research participants, and it's therefore important to note that the results are just one subjective interpretation of the data and not an exact picture of it. So then data collection was through in-depth semi-structured interview with management level staff in conservancies or non-state protected areas in Laikipia. And given that we are in the midst of a pandemic and that I am based in Europe, I had to conduct the interviews online via Zoom. And I'll just jump straight to the results because of time. One of the main issues that came up was COVID-19 and conservation crisis. And the fact that we are in the middle of a global pandemic means that it's no surprise that COVID-19 was top of mind to the challenges that face protected areas. And the main issue was the loss of income as a result of global restrictions of movement. And a lot of conservancies are dependent on tourism income, and this money dried up, and this has driven them to financial trouble. Now, this has led to environmental concerns, such as direct environmental issues, such as the dumping of masks in conservancies, which did not happen before the pandemic, and indirect impacts, such as local communities turning to destructive environmental activities, such as sand harvesting to replace lost tourism income, and conservancies turning to real estate and agriculture to supplement the income that has been lost as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then another issue was the role of tourism in conservation. And tourism is the main income generating activity for protected areas in Kenya. And while tourism has its benefits, there are some negative aspects that come with it. One of them being the infrastructure development as a result of tourism that fragments the natural landscape. And also the fact that tourism is very susceptible to crisis and makes it unreliable as a source of income. Then looking at conservation and tourism policy and governance, despite the fact that we are looking at private conservation areas, government policy is still an important part in how wildlife is protected. And then when you look at the role of local communities in conservation, where there is a recognition that the success of conservation is pegged on the support of local communities who live close to and alongside wildlife. And while it seems that local community involvement is considered important, there more needs to be done to expand the scope of local involvement in conservation, and that local community conservation initiatives require support and goodwill from both government and local partners. Additionally, there is the need to incorporate indigenous knowledge, and this has not really gained widespread acceptance yet. Then we also have issues of climate change and human impact on the environment, and the relationships between human and nature, and that there are three integral aspects of this relationship between human and nature. First, that nature is integral to human survival. And second, the interconnectedness of humans and nature as a collective, where humans are viewed as part of nature and therefore have a responsibility towards nature. And lastly, humans' relationships and attitudes towards nature. So from this, I developed a post-human conservation framework. And this, using the data, we can begin reimagining conservation in non-state protected areas through the lens of posthumanism. A post-human approach to conservation emphasizes an indigenous-led approach to environmental management that follows the principles of justice and deep respect for both humans and non-humans, accepting of difference and understanding the connection and interdependence of the human and the world around them. There are four paradigms that were identified by Schultes and Hefner as being barriers to a local-led conservation governance and practice. And these are the ones on your screen: the nature-culture divide, the concept of wilderness, overcoming the work-leisure dichotomy, and addressing the Western nature of tourism. So how do you overcome the nature-culture divide? First step is understanding that you cannot separate humans from nature. And this framework calls on leveraging on indigenous knowledge and promoting peaceful coexistence with nature and emphasizing intrinsic rather than economic value. Deconstructing the concept of wilderness, and this we are referring to the idea of protected areas as untouched wilderness. And this has historically been used to erase the presence of indigenous communities from their land. And to dispel this, we need a change in how tourism is marketed and to change the perception of non-indigenous people when it comes to the consumptive use of nature by indigenous communities. And then addressing the Western nature of tourism, where we need to understand that tourism and the concept of leisure are Western concepts that do not exist in indigenous cultures. And local communities have largely been unsuccessful in impacting the conservation landscape because modern conservation practice is alien to them. And if you look at it through a post-human ethic, it's important that we find ways of understanding worldviews different from our own and doing what we can to cultivate dialogue, not only with indigenous people, but with other species as well. And then the last one would be overcoming the work-leisure dichotomy, where protected areas are primarily associated with leisure. And similar to nature culture, nature is seen as an escape from the negatives of urban living. And you saw this when people flocked to rural areas to escape the lockdowns caused by the virus. And these binaries that exist in conservation management were not part of indigenous people's lives, from whom the various life aspects are interconnected. So to conclude, the main idea is to adopt post-human principles to shape more just and ethical futures for conservation, and with issues such as the COVID pandemic exerting even more pressure on an already suffering sector, there is now more than ever a need to look beyond merely delivering critique and instead focus on producing affirmative ideas that might guide conservation into a new future. These are just a few ideas for future research. Looking further into posthumanism and conservation, interdisciplinary research into conservation conflicts, and and incorporating values of respect and justice in tourism. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I just left it to added in some more minutes, but yeah, you were able to make it. So
thank you.
So thank you, Lemmy, for that presentation. Members, as we might all remember, I hope you're noting down your questions, which will be asked at the end of after the last presentation. Just to check again, I don't know if Helder is in the room now, because I haven't seen him. Helder, are you there? Otherwise, then I will invite Gift Murasherwa to give your presentation. Gift, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm just sharing my slides. One moment. Where is the share? Share. Oh, share screen, yes. Okay. One screen to this screen, yes, share. Okay. Are you able to see my screen? Session chair, is my screen visible?
Your screen is visible. Go ahead.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Come on. Hi, everyone. My name is Gift Murasherwa. I am presenting a paper on mountain gorilla tourism, an approach to conservation of endangered species. We created this paper with my colleague, Washington Makuza. We are from the Cape Peninsula University of Technology in Cape Town. I would like to acknowledge a number of people who assisted us with our research. This is part of a master's dissertation, which was supervised by Professor J.P. Spencer, and the student who was involved with this study was Imelda Emoni. We also would like to acknowledge the Uganda Wildlife Authority for giving us permission to conduct the study. This is the presentation outline for our study, starting from the background, and I'll show you the reference list which were consulted in compiling the presentation. Right, the mountain gorilla, which is scientifically known as Gorilla beringei, it remains crucial to the growing tourism industry of Central and Eastern Africa. This tourism product has allowed incentivized protection and conservation of wildlife in 3 countries. The mountain gorilla is found in 3 countries, which are Uganda, Rwanda, and the DRC. These countries are rich in fauna and flora, and they share boundaries with some of their protected areas. They extend into one another. Through the strategic planning or heightened awareness and involving locals in the conservation process, it has seen the number of gorillas increasing over the years. So the numbers were failing, but through some strategies, the numbers were seen going up. The mountain gorilla has become a leading tourism asset, and it presents numerous opportunities for local communities. Going back to the 1980s, mountain gorillas were at the risk of extinction due to human activities. They were losing their habitat, hunting, poaching, or the spread of diseases. They made the number of gorillas to go down. Through the work of Diane Fossey, who came up with some strategies of conserving gorillas in their natural habitat through ecotourism. Her work assisted in sustaining the mountain gorillas. The definition for ecotourism has been provided from Hani 1999. Gorilla parks such as that one in Mwindi Forest has afforded opportunities for ecotourism and economic growth through mountain gorilla tourism. So a number of governing bodies, they later on grew to understand the benefits of protecting the gorillas. Due to their highly protected status today, the gorillas are the only great ape species which has seen their population increasing in size. Despite that, despite the increase in number of the mountain gorillas, they still face a number of challenges, such as poaching and also COVID-19, because many industries were affected, people lost jobs. So perhaps some could be resorting to hunting to sustain themselves, which is problematic. Right. For more than a decade, that graph is only illustrating how the number of gorillas have been increasing over the years. So for more than a decade, the mountain gorillas has been classified by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN's red lists of threatened species, as critically endangered. So they were critically endangered for more than a decade. Then when the number shot up to more than 1,000, then it was downlisted to endangered. Their numbers once plummeted or fell down below 680 individuals, which led to extensive efforts to conserve and protect this mammal species. There was the last census of the gorillas that was undertaken in 2018. From that census, the number was seen to be at 1,069 individuals. This unique product, the gorillas, have flourished and continue to exist because of tourism. So tourism has enabled the increase in number of mountain gorillas. So when people go to trek for gorillas, they pay. So the permits, fees, they go towards supporting conservation programs and community projects. However, more still needs to be done in terms of intensive conservation So we are talking of widespread anti-poaching programs, which need to be maximized, removing some snares which are set up by poachers, also more patrols or close collaboration with the communities to support those programs. On that picture, we are seeing a young gorilla that was trapped in a poacher snare. That happened in 2020. You can see people have some masks there. This study was guided by two theories, which was the social exchange theory and the stakeholder theory. Looking at the social exchange theory, it suggests that individuals interact with others because of the benefits that could be derived from such a relationship. So when people engage in something, they want to reap some benefits. When they don't see benefits, they are more likely not to support that affair. Then looking at the stakeholders theory, it suggests that the management of tourism resources usually requires combined effort. It's not one person's job. So combined effort by various stakeholders, they need to work together so that conservation can happen. In any given tourist destination, various stakeholders with varying interests, relations, varying degrees of cooperation can be found. So the current study, it highlights how the protection of the gorilla species has impacted communities residing near protected areas. Right. This study was conducted in Butogota Town Council in southwestern Uganda, which is near the borders of DRC. And it was a qualitative study, which it involved some interviews with 187 key stakeholders in the Butogota Town Council. These stakeholders included government officials, the Mwindi Impenetrable National Park staffs, for example, the rangers, the guides, etc., business owners in the area, some religious leaders, educationists, some teachers, local leaders, headmen were all interviewed by the researchers. This happened in 2018 to 2019. This is the map of the study area. You see the arrow there on top. The red arrow is pointing where Butogota is located. Right, moving on to the key findings. We had 187 participants, and they had extensive knowledge of their area since the mean duration of service or of staying within the study area was 13.6. So it suggests that they all knew all the activities which were happening in the area. Right, the study participants, looking at the benefits and opportunities which emanate from mountain gorilla tourism, the study participants indicated how they benefited from mountain gorilla tourism activities in their area. Their responses varied from participants with contributions that included job creations, entrepreneurial opportunities, infrastructure development, and many others. So some roads were expanded and renovated. However, more can still be done. And this slide captures some of the directive verbatim or the quotation which came from the interviews. So let's look at a few. On the right side, we have some religious leaders who cited that we were given Bibles a few years ago. So they saw that as one of the benefit or opportunity that came from such type of tourism. Also improving standards of living. My business has grown. Then the last one here at the bottom, this person is so happy her children are attending at better schools. Then also in determining the ways to improve mountain gorilla tourism activities in the study area, the participants were requested to suggest mountain gorilla tourism management strategies which are best suited to promote sustainability of these unique tourism products. These are the themes which emerged from the interviews. Local involvement, fighting corruption, more training is needed, area development, infrastructure, etc. Moving forward to the conclusion, I think I have a minute. Mountain gorilla tourism plays a crucial role in wildlife conservation and thus contributes significantly to national economies. Gorilla trekking generates vital funds for conservation programs. So there's money that comes from gorilla tourism activities. Local communities who are residing around the parks, they benefit from tourism. Therefore, they end up encouraging or supporting conservation effort. This support would lead to limited illegal activities. We talk of poaching, deforestation, cutting down of trees, human encroaching into the parks. Those issues are resolved when locals are benefiting. Okay. However, more can be done to ensure that locals benefit from tourism activities in the area. For example, there is need for continuous maintenance of roads, expansion of infrastructure, ways to deal with corruption, which is endemic to Africa, empowerment of local people, controlled access into the protected area. These were some of the things which need to be done to improve gorilla tourism. The study should assist authorities and relevant stakeholders to promote community-based tourism products and services that improve local skills and job opportunities. Finally, it also offers long-term prospects for the park to exercise conservation initiatives for the mountain gorillas as they promote ecotourism. With the challenges that have been brought by the COVID-19 pandemic, it could be recommended that a comparative study that assesses the socio-economic impact during and post the pandemic era be undertaken. This study was conducted pre-COVID, so it might be interesting to get the views of the stakeholders during and the post-pandemic period. This may reveal the shift in local perceptions on the ways in which mountain gorilla tourism is managed in Uganda and other destinations offering similar products. Thank you so much. These are the reference lists which were consulted when we constructed this presentation. And questions, Washington will assist me with taking questions when we get to that segment. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Gift, for that presentation. So members, now it's time for asking questions to our three presenters. That is, if I think now I'm almost sure that Helder is not coming or is not in and is not coming. So Gift, there is a question from Manwa. He's asking, what are some examples to empower communities?
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that question. Let me give an opportunity for my colleague to also come in. Washington, can you open your mic and contribute?
Okay, thank you so much and good day, everyone. Sorry, Gift, I think you're now sharing your EMOS screen, so I don't seem to.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much for the question. I think that's okay. You're saying, I Gift, what are some of examples for communities? So there are quite several ways to empower the communities. One of the ways is to make sure that there is community engagement in everything that is being done in the area. So this could be done by either you can make use of the local people to participate in every tourism development that is happening in the area. By so doing, one could also think of making sure that those who are working close to those protected areas, they should be the people from that specific area, so that it also helps in alleviating the conflict between the tourism development that happens in that area with the local community that is there. So if we are to empower the communities, it's all about involving everyone who is around that specific area to take part in that, as suggested by the stakeholder theory, that it's not one element that can work in isolation when you're talking about the tourism activities, which also relates to the conservation areas. So it's all about making sure that the community is involved in every activity that is taking place there. By so doing, that's how the community can start to be empowered, and they start to feel that whatever that is happening in the area, they are part of it, and it's also for their benefit. I'm not so sure if I have exhaustively answered the question, but I just thought to give just in brief, to that question.
Chair, can I have a follow-up on that discussion?
Yes, please. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, allow me to engage in this discussion on empowerment. And I hear these words said so many times without them being broken down. Engagement, participation, involving. I think that's exactly what the question was about. What do we mean when we say engage communities? When we say community participation? When we say involve communities? And I want to give use examples of what has happened with things like civil rights movements and or women empowerment movements. It's been very clear, you know, give women a chance to be executives in organizations, allow women to participate in politics, give women voting rights. So we have to be very specific. It's I'm always concerned that when it comes to communities, we don't go deeper and break down these things that we call participation, involving, and engagement. And because of that, can you hear me? I hear there is no sound.
We can hear you.
Yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. And because of that, we have had a lot of what I call empowerment programs for communities in tourism in Africa. And we have not moved our communities to the space where they're supposed to be in tourism. They're supposed to be owners. When we talk about empowerment, we are also talking about co-ownership or ownership. We're talking of co-management or management. We are talking about integration in the supply chain of tourism and the value chain of tourism. We must be very clear when with these things, when we go to communities. Otherwise, we'll keep doing research and we'll keep having programs of empowerment. And when we advise authorities, like if Uganda Wildlife Authority were to receive this report, and the report says engage communities, allow participation, involve communities, they will not know exactly what it is that they're supposed to do. The only specific I had here was employment, right? That was a very specific way of returning value to communities. So we should get to the point where we say empowerment means valuing the contribution of communities to tourism that is happening in this particular area, and calculating that in form of shares for the community from every tourism dollar or coin or shilling or kwacha, whatever it is that comes into this community. That is a form of empowerment that is very, very specific. So I challenge us, those of us who work in the area and do research in the areas, in the space of communities and tourism, to start highlighting this empowerment, engagement, involving issues that we mean very specifically, so that our studies will make meaning to the areas that we study. Otherwise, we keep hearing the same things and our communities remain in the same space. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Judy, for that contribution. Yes, maybe something also to think through as researchers, like you said, the word community, I also find it as another word that is usually needs to be broken down, because communities are rarely homogeneous. Maybe Gift and colleague, I don't know if you took that into consideration, but I think that is a very, very important
I think we lost the chair.
I think the chair just disappeared.
I know on my side only, or
no, I can't hear her either. So I know she had an unstable internet connection. So hopefully she will come back. Okay. In the meantime, we've still got a few more minutes for more questions and discussion. And I'm hoping that Christine will come back and finish what she was talking about. I've just gone into the chat to see where we were at. She's disappeared. I know she had a problem with internet. So there was the discussion going on there. Did anyone want to add any more to that discussion before we see if there were any other questions for any of the other authors?
I think the
Okay,
chair was talking about something important
I
about
know.
community, because that is where the problem begins in the whole concept of community engagement, empowerment, or participation. Sometimes it's about the community that we are talking about and the assumption of homogeneous communities. We just had in the other presentation, I think that was Dr. Linnett, when Dr. Linnett was talking about social identity theory. And it reminded me about the identities of communities or, in tourism destinations. And we have many different communities and they all have different interests and they all need different types of empowerment and different levels of engagement and participation. But sometimes we lump them all together. And when we do that, we actually disenfranchise some communities because we work with something that could only be valuable for a section of the communities in the place where tourism happens. So I would have wanted to hear her say more about that, but would appreciate any other contributions on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other contributions on that? And I can see some comments in the chat from Dr. Williams about valuing community and individual entrepreneurs is essential. So I think there is a lot to be discussed around both some of the words we were talking about in terms of engagement, empowerment, but also then this word community, I think, as pointed out, is also equally challenging and something we shouldn't take for granted. Now, Naomi, and I saw that you had a question in the chat as well, but I'm not sure whether you had managed to ask it of Lemmy. I can ask it if you'd like. You can probably see it in the chat. If community conservation of Mount gorillas has improved over the years, why is it that poaching and illegal hunting of gorillas has escalated even before COVID? Now I'm worried people can't hear me. Okay, good. That's good. Lemmy, did you have an answer to that question?
If I'm not wrong, I think the question is for Gift. It's not for
sorry,
me.
for Gift. Yes, apologies.
Yes,
wrong way around. Apologies.
Hi, colleagues. Gift, are you going to take the question? Okay, I'm just going to go through the question again. So here it says that if community conservation of mountain gorillas has improved over the years, why is it that poaching or illegal hunting of gorillas has escalated even before COVID-19? You know, one of the most significant aspects that is happening in the tourism industry, without the exception of mountain gorilla tourism, is that despite every conservation activities that can be put in place, still poaching and illegal hunting can go on. So we need to agree or maybe disagree to agree on the fact that maybe more activities or more conservation initiatives, they need to be put in place. Because even if we have conservation programs, for example, if I take for instance, that we look at the conservation programs against the rhino poaching, if we are to look at it from the South African perspectives. But despite all the conservation activities that are put in place, still we see poaching and illegal hunting going on. So I don't really think that there would be a straightforward answer as to why would then the poaching and the illegal of the gorilla hunting is still continuing to grow, despite the conservation initiatives. Because, you know, the more we become more conservationist in trying to curb this illegal hunting, the more also advanced the poachers are also getting in. So it's all about not to say that we have implemented this conservation strategy for this year, then we fold our hands and stop there. I would want to believe and assume that the conservation that we're talking about here should not be a one-stop thing. It should be an ongoing process whereby if we have implemented certain conservation strategies, then we look at the response of the poachers. How are they, up their game, and how us as tourism practitioners are going to react to that. But also, not only to stay on the reactive mode, but also to try and go on in the proactive mode, whereby maybe one would do an investigation as to what ways are these poachers are trying to adopt at which period, and then some conservation methods they can even put in place. Because at times it's not all about they get into these protected areas and do the poaching. They can just put a trap with like the snares, and then no one would know that a trap has been put in there. So those things, they do happen, but I would want to submit that conservation strategies and initiatives, they shouldn't be a once-off thing, but should be that ongoing process, so as to reduce, if at all, maybe eliminate poaching at all. Thank you so much for that question.
Yeah, thank you so much for that response. Do we have any other question or contribution to the debate? Apologies, my internet got issues, so I had to go off for a while.
Sorry, Chair, I don't know if I see correctly, but seems like there's another question. Maybe, I don't know if it was attended to from Nicola Theron.
Yeah, please go ahead and respond.
The one that says it is very important. Oh, it's not a question, I think it's a comment. Okay, it says it is very important to engage with community leaders prior to engagement with community as a whole to get buying powers in. Absolutely, I would like to concur with that point that has been raised there, because when we deal with tourism resources, we would want to believe that these resources, they dwell in most of the communities. And the way to go is always to make sure that you get into the community and talk with the community about anything or any development that you would want to do in those areas as well, which also relates to the social exchange theory, that should the community perceive that there's a benefit involved within the exchange, in terms of what the tourism developers coming into the community with, then they would be prone to say, okay, we are okay to accept whatever that needs to be done in the area, as long as they perceive that they will benefit. But then before any development could be done in any area, before implementing anything that has to do with the community, the first thing is to go there and engage with the community first. But it sounds at times, I would also want to submit that from the African context, at times it sounds a little bit more theory than practical. At times, when the leaders feel that they want to do something in a certain community, they just go and tell the community that this is what is going to happen. So there is a little bit of that imbalance. Maybe that is another topic for another day that might also need to be explored, and looked at.
Okay, thank you so much. I can see that we seem not to, let me see. Yeah, Judy, you want to say something, but.
Yes, I just wanted to say as my last input, that community engagement is not about a few meetings and workshops under the tree with communities where we serve them a drink and give them a travel allowance for attending the meetings. The best way of community engagement is to let the communities discuss for themselves, explore for themselves, and come forth with suggestions at their own time and at their own pace. Sometimes we rush communities through engagement because we are working with our own programs, and therefore we miss out on very important steps of community evaluating and setting the conditions for engagement. I believe that if community has not set the times and conditions for engagement in conservation or in tourism or in any other development, then it is an outside-led development, and it will always have challenges with the community, however well-intentioned it was. So it's not about the number of meetings that we organize for the communities. It's how we allow, enable and allow communities to explore what is possible and practical for them at their current stage of development, because communities are always evolving. There's some programs that are brought into communities that is way ahead of the level of community evolution, where the community is at one place and the proposed engagement is 10 years ahead of the community. That kind of engagement, you will actually have project sympathizers who participate because they sympathize with the project or for the benefits they can get out of it in the short term. So engagement is a long-term process, and anyone who talks community engagement should be in it for the long term.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I agree totally. Thank you so much, Judy. I think that is a good way to end. I can see that we are already on top of the hour. A very big thank you to our presenters, and I want to thank you all for the engaging discussion. And from the discussion, we can see that this is a really interesting topic that we can even engage further even after this conference. I'm sure that we have our contacts so we can continue engaging on this, but a big thank you to all the presenters and to all those who have contributed to the discussion. Thank you so much.